Hello and welcome back. So now we are in day 5. In day 4, we have seen various processing strategies and we saw iterative processing using for each. Now we'll continue. We will see how to do iterative processing using batch job. Actually, this batch job topic is discussed in developer training. If you have not watched my batch job in developer playlist, here is my developer playlist, Mulesoft training playlist. And in day 23, I have already discussed about batch processing. So if you know batch, feel free to skip this. But I suggest that you go through this video because it will be like a quick revision and I will be implementing a different use case for batch processing here. So let us get started.
So why batch? If you want to process huge number of records parallelly, then batch can be used. We discussed about various scenarios. We discussed about iterative processing using for each, parallel for each, and then we understood some problems with parallel for each. So today we'll concentrate on how batch job works. Batch job is a scope actually. So we can use this batch job scope within a flow. So if you drag and drop batch job, it will look like this. You can see there are two parts, on complete part and process records part. So we understood that payload for batch job will be an array, and batch job processes the records in multiple steps. We can have multiple steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. Batch job is processed in 3 phases. We will quickly revise it. Load and dispatch phase, process records phase, and finally on complete phase. You are able to see process records and on complete. Load and dispatch phase is an implicit phase. What it will do is, it will take the list of records, each item in the array it will take, and will populate a record queue. We understood. So every batch job will have a record queue. The records are populated into record queue. Actually, before batch job, we will be having a Mule event, which has Mule message as payload, Mule message which contains payload. This payload is an array, and Mule message contains attributes. This is a Mule message. A Mule event also contains vars, we know. Now, this event has payload as array. This array will be iterated. For each item in this array, a record object is created. Actually, a record also is a data structure which has some properties and some variables, some properties of records. It is a data structure. Just like Mule message is a data structure, record also is a data structure which also contains payload and importantly vars. These variables are called as record variables. So every record contains some variables and some extra properties which will contain the state of the record. Now, first phase is load and dispatch phase, where a record queue will be populated with one record object for every item in the array. Okay. So batch job will use thread pools to process the records. These thread pools are from Uber thread pool. And by default, 2 into number of cores will be the maximum threads which will be used by batch job by default. So on my machine, the number of cores are 8. So 16 threads will be used. Now these threads, what they do is they pick one record and check what is the status of this record. The status properties contain the status of the record, which says whether step 1 is processed or step 2 is processed, etc. There will be a variable or there will be a property called as processed steps, which will contain the name of the processed steps. For the first time, this processed steps will be an empty array. So whenever a thread gets a record with processed steps as empty array, it will execute the step 1. Assume that step 1 is successful. Then for that record, processed steps is updated and it will add step 1 as processed step. Once the step 1 is completed, the record will be kept back in the queue. So like that, 16 threads by default will pick 16 records from the record queue, and 16 threads are parallelly executing step 1. Once execution is done, the records are kept back in the queue. Then at some point, again, the same threads may pick up the record for which step 1 is completed. They will check. When a record is picked, the threads will check what are the processed steps. Okay, step 1 is complete. Then the thread will execute step 2 for the record. Once step 2 is completed successfully, then the record variables, the variable will be updated saying processed records step 1, step 2. Then record will be kept back in the queue. Then again, after some time, the same record may get picked by step 3 and step 3 will execute. So like that, all the records will go through the steps sequentially. That means a record will not come to step 2 until step 1 is complete. A record may not come to step 3 until step 3 is complete. Sorry, step 2 is complete. So records will come to steps sequentially, but multiple threads are parallelly processing the records from record queue. Once all the records in the record queue are completed, then on complete phase will execute. Whatever you keep in on complete phase will be executed. Then batch job is completed. So this is the concept. And one more thing is, whenever a record comes to record queue, whenever a record comes to any step, at every step we can configure some conditions. If those conditions are satisfied, then only corresponding step will be executed. Otherwise, the record will go to next step. So quickly, let me show you an example. Here, I have a flow which is configured with on, new, or update file. It is polling for records in my C drive. Files is the best directory, and this is pointing to and this is pointing to input batch folder. So C drive, files, input batch. I have to keep my files here. Then transform message component is transforming the payload. Then batch job will get kicked off. The payload after transformer will be an array. Then in batch job, I have 2 steps. Now, if you see second step, I have configured accept policy. By default, if you don't configure accept policy, the default accept policy is no failures. So that means if a record failed in step 1, then the record will not go to step 2. Okay. So the step 2 will accept only successful records if the record has completed all the previous steps successfully. Not only that, you can write an accept expression. Here I'm writing if payload.brand name not equals to HP. Okay. Then only the record will be accepted into second step. So actually in this scenario, what I want is, this is my CSV file, which contains lot of records. Okay. Now it is products. It is containing products. Each row is containing product ID, brand, name, price. So what I want to do is, in step 1, I want to insert into database. In step 2, I want to send the records to my SOAP web service. These are the 2 steps I have. Then In step 2, I'm not accepting HP brand. Rest all brands will be sent to web service consumer. And in on complete, I'm just printing a message on complete. Actually, in on complete phase, the payload will be a batch job result object, which contains some data like how many failed records, how many loaded records, how many completed processed records, successful records, etc. So this batch job result contains some fields by using which we can generate a report about batch job. So in on complete phase, mostly we can extract the data from batch job result, create a report, and maybe send a message or a mail, etc. Okay. Now, one more thing is at batch job level, I have some configuration. I can configure max failed records. So by default, max failed records is 0. That means if in any one of the step, if there is one failure means exception being thrown, then the batch job will fail. So step 2 will not be executed for any further records. But in batch, I want to tolerate up to 10 failures. So even if 10 failures are happening, I don't want my batch job processing to start. I want the batch job to continue up to 10 failed records. But if more than 10 failed records are coming, then I want to stop the batch process. Right. So that is my requirement. Okay. Now, if exception or error occurs in any one of the steps, how are we going to handle records in batch? What we need to do is mostly we'll have one more step in the process records phase, which can be configured to accept only failures. And here we can do whatever we want to handle failed records. I will just write. I will make this step name as step 3. And in the logger, I will write in step 3 plus payload as string. Okay. So I wrote like this. Let me try to explain you what is happening. One more thing before I go ahead. In step 1, actually what I want to do, I want to insert data into database. What I could have done is I could have used insert in the processor, but that is not good because if there are 1,000 records, 1,000 inserts will go to database, which will cause a performance issue. So maybe what I could do is in every step, there is a part called as aggregator. You can see this aggregator is empty for these steps. But for step 1, I have added a batch aggregator in the aggregator part and configured an aggregator size of 10, for example. So what will happen? Whenever record comes to step 1, it will be added to an array. Okay. The record will not be kept into record queue immediately. The record will be aggregated by this batch aggregator until the aggregator size of 10. So once the aggregator size is reached, then whatever you write inside batch aggregator will be executed. The payload inside batch aggregator will be an array of size, whatever you mentioned. So here I'm using a bulk insert to insert the array of records. That is how we can use batch job. Okay. So I'll tell you one more thing before I get started. At batch job level, there is one more configuration called as batch block size. I will tell you the meaning of it. By default, it is 100. Now, I made the batch block size as 1. Let us see what will happen and what is the significance of this. We will see. So I gave the batch block size as 1. Okay. So now I can get started. But actually, I'm inserting a CSV. Here, if you see the PID, product ID, is duplicate. Right? So actually, my queries, whenever I'm inserting this product ID, whatever is in the CSV file is ignored, and my database will auto increment, is configured to increment the product IDs. So I will truncate this table. Okay. If I see now, there are no products. I want to insert into products. My product ID will be an auto increment one. Okay. Fine. I will start my batch application. But here I'm consuming a SOAP web service. So I will start a SOAP web service, which I have. Okay. Don't worry. This is a SOAP web service written by me. We have used it earlier also. Just starting that locally. Okay. So I will run this application. You have to put the file inside this folder, input batch. So I'll copy this CSV file and I'll try to paste it in this folder. But let us wait until the deployment is done. I'll clear the console. Now I will paste it here. See, it should be picked up. Oh, there is an exception. What is it saying? The query, it is saying product ID does not have a default value. Okay, I will do one thing. In this product table, whatever I have, the product ID was not configured to increment automatically. So I'll drop this. I need to do a small modification. I will create a table with product ID auto increment. So I have a create table. Here, if you see product ID auto increment, let it. I'll create. Oh, it is in DB1. Okay, wait. I will set as default schema and execute. Okay, now the product table is created. There are no records. Okay, I'll clear this console. There was exception. We'll see exception scenario next. I will paste the file again. Okay, let us see. Yes, we will see a lot of threads are concurrently processing. You can see there are some logs printed in inside batch aggregator. So when step 1 is processing, this logger is logging inside batch aggregator payload. You can see as I configured the batch aggregator size as 10. So 10 records are aggregated and then insert is done. So you can see the payload, whatever is written here, is 10. Payload size is 10 in every log. So step 1 contains these all things. And then you can see the output. In step 2, see the important thing. For step 2, I said payload.brand name not equals to HP. So you can see there are HP products, Asus, Apple, Samsung. In the console, in step 2, are you seeing HP products? No, right? So step 2 was not executed. And now you can see step 2 finished. Complete phase also is executed. But did I see whatever I wrote in step 3? This one? No, because I have configured the step 3 to accept only failures. Okay. I want to simulate one error. For example, I'm going to add one more field, one more record where brand is equals to Siva. Okay. Then I'm going to simulate an error in step 1. I will drag and drop transfer message. And here I will write a simple expression. If payload dot brand name, I guess that is what I am using. Yeah, brand name. If payload dot brand name is equals to Siva, I want to throw an error, raise an error. In data view, I can use DW colon runtime colon. There's a method or a function called as fail. I can give a failure message. We don't accept Siva brand. Just for example, I'm writing else I will return the payload. Simple. So I have simulated a scenario. Okay. Let it get redeployed. Okay, it got redeployed. Now in step 1, for one record, exception will be generated. Only for that, I should see the log from step 3. Let's see. Yes, I can see one exception. Okay, I can see one exception. We don't accept Siva brand. And this is from step 1. It is saying found an exception in step 1. And it logged. It is saying this is the first record to show this exception. Subsequent records with same failure message will not be logged for performance. Okay, this is the exception. But my batch job did not terminate. You can see the records are processed as usual, right? So in step 3, now in step 3, it got executed. Here, okay, it is saying cannot coerce an object. Okay, so it is a map object, the one which is coming from database. Maybe it was not a string, so this expression failed. That's okay. But the concept I want you to understand is the control came to step 3 only for the failed records. This is how we handle errors in Mule batch. Okay. And one more thing I want to tell you. As I configured for this batch job, as I configured max fail records as 10, even though there was one failure, the batch job was not terminated. Okay, that you understood. I can give -1 if I don't want my batch job to terminate in any case. I want it to go through all records. Then I can give -1. What is this batch block size? So as I told you, the threads will pick one record from the queue. If there are 10,000 records or even more, one thread will pick one record, process a step, keep it back in the queue. Again, one record, keep it back in the queue. So there will be a lot of thread switching, which will actually cause performance issues. So to optimize the performance, we can configure that whenever a thread is picking from the queue, it can pick 100 records. I have more than 10,000 records. Whenever a thread picks, I can configure it to pick 100 records as a block. Then a thread will pick 100 records at once into the queue. Actually, whenever the load and dispatch phase is populating the record queue, it will populate as blocks of records. It will populate the blocks of records. Each block is whatever we configured 100. So a block of 100 records will be taken by a thread. For each record in this block, corresponding steps are executed. Then block will be kept back in the queue. So batch process can be configured to process block of records to increase the performance they have given us. Okay, so if you see the tooltip for performance reasons, batch records are queued and scheduled in blocks. You can define. And what is this max concurrency? By default, I told 16 threads will be used from the Uber thread. I want to use 50 threads because I know there are a lot of records. I can configure max concurrency as 50. So 50 records will be processed concurrently. Okay. What you can do is now, you can go to my GitHub of this advanced Mule, open day5 folder. You'll be seeing the documentation for batch. Complete that before going to next video.